So we want to talk about looking at the three different forms of a linear equation, specifically relating to finding slope from these equations. So there are three main forms of a linear equation that we're going to look at here. Sorry, we've got some Zoom issues here. And each one of them is going to have their own benefit depending on what we want. For the most part, the name of the equation is going to tell you what the equation will directly give you information on. So this first one is called slope-intercept form. So true to its name, it tells us the slope of the line and an intercept. So an intercept is describing where things cross. Specifically, what this is going to tell us is the y-intercept of the line. So this is where the line crosses the y-axis. So if we graphed it and we had our little line here, the y-intercept is this guy right here where it crosses the y-axis, okay? So this is really important information. It's going to not only allow us to eventually graph the line, but it's going to allow us to just use some information from the line. So the form of the equation is y equals mx plus b. So we've already seen m before, right? We just saw m a little while ago. And m is always just our slope, right? M is our slope. So we're going to look down here and just say this is our slope. All right, so the coefficient of x, the number in front of the variable x, that's always going to represent our slope in the y-intercept form. So for example, if I had y equals 3/2 x, we're going to say plus 6, my slope would equal 3/2. Okay, just the number in front of the x, the coefficient. Okay, now we have this b out here, and it is important to kind of include the sign with it. We do need to know if it is a positive or a negative value, so we look directly to the left of it to determine that. This is going to be the y part of the y-intercept. Okay, so it's a little bit of a mouthful, but the reason we have to say it's the y part is because an intercept is a point. And a point always has two parts, an x part and a y part, right? And it's housed with parentheses. So this gives us the y part of the y-intercept. Now, on the y-axis, the value of x is always 0. So the nice thing about the y-intercept, so we're going to say y-intercept here, I-N-T, E-R-C-E-P-T, there we go. All right. So the nice thing about the y-intercept is when we write it, so a point is always x comma y. Our x value is always going to be 0 for this coordinate point, and our y value is always going to be whatever this b value is. So if up in this equation I was looking for my y-intercept, I would say, oh, well, it's crossing the y-axis. That tells me x has to be 0. And my b value here is a positive 6. So that would be my point. And I could go and plot that on a coordinate plane if I wanted to. So that's slope-intercept form. It tells us a slope and a y-intercept, just like the name says. All right, let's take a look at the next one. So the next form is called point slope, and it's going to tell you exactly those things. It's going to tell you a point on the line, okay? Not necessarily an intercept, it can be, but it's just any point on the line. And it's going to tell you the slope, all right? So looking at this equation, our slope is easily identified. It's just m. Our slope is always going to be m, okay? And then we have this y1 and this x1 value. So when we were calculating slope before from 2 points, you might have seen we referred to points as x1, y1, x2, y2. This is kind of the same thing. So this x1, y1 is just a point on the line. I guess I should put an A in front of that so it's a little bit more grammatically correct. So this x1, y1 is just a point on the line. One thing we want to note is that in the equation, we are subtracting that value. So when we go to kind of get some information out of point slope form, we have to keep that in mind. that subtraction there, when we then go to pull that information out, is kind of going to be asking us to do the opposite of what the equation is saying, and we'll see that in a moment. Okay, so here's our last form. This is called standard form. Now, you can tell by the name that the name doesn't have a word like slope, point, or intercept. So standard form is what I like to think of as kind of the sneaky form. It doesn't tell us anything straightforward. We have to go and look for all of our information, okay? So standard form is ax plus by equals c. So we have these values, a, b, and c, in this equation. None of these values directly tell us our slope or an intercept or a point. They're just kind of numbers that then help us determine those eventually. So a, b, and c, when we write something in standard form, traditionally we have them all as integers. And if we're writing in appropriate standard form, the a value should be positive. Okay. Sometimes it's not if you're given a line to graph or something like that, but if you're putting something in standard form, we should make an effort to make this a positive. So we're going to kind of do a little manipulation to this equation and see how we can piece together some information out of it. So I'm going to take this in its just kind of abstract form, ax plus by equals c, and I'm going to convert it to slope-intercept. So right now I don't have any actual values in here. It's just the representation of the values, okay? So I'm going to solve this for y, because I want it to be in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract ax from both sides. Now you'll note I didn't write that under the c because they're not like terms, right? They're not like terms. So I don't want to make it look like I'm trying to combine them. So we're left with 0 right there. So we have by equals, now I'm going to be very careful how I write this next side, because if we look at slope-intercept form, the x comes first. So this is a minus ax, so I'm going to write it as a negative ax. And then this c, we're going to assume was a plus c. It didn't have a subtraction or a negative sign in front of it. So we're going to say plus c. Okay. Last thing I need to do is I need y alone, so I got to divide by this b. Now, because there's addition over here, I have to do kind of two divisions. First one with the negative ax, second one with the c. B over b is just 1, and we get y equals negative a divided by b. Remember, a and b are just standing for some number. Normally, we would see them as actual values like 2, 4, 6, something like that. So then times x plus c over b. Now, if we look at this in reference to y equals mx plus b form, we can see that right here, the coefficient of x, that's our slope. So in standard form, when we want to find our slope, all we have to do is take the opposite, or negative a. So I like to say the opposite because it's not always going to be negative. It's just going to be the opposite of whatever it was originally. So opposite of a divided by b. So that was sort of the point of converting there, is to figure out how to do that. Okay, so standard form doesn't really like to tell us much. We have to go hunting for some information, and this is how we're going to find our slope from standard form. So it can give us our slope, it's just a little bit more roundabout to get it. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. So we want to identify the form that we're in, as well as find the slope from this form. So the first one, a couple things that could clue you into the form. First thing being, I have parentheses in here. And then I have values adding and subtracting to x and y are on opposite sides of the equation. So the only form that really does those things is our point slope form. So this is our point slope. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of abbreviate here to save you guys some writing. And in point slope form, our slope, like we saw before, was always this number in front of the parentheses with the x variable there. So we're going to just look for that number in front of the parentheses with the x variable. And that number right there is a -2. So our slope is going to be -2. Okay. Next one. So now we have 2 times x plus 3 times y equals 12. So both of our variables are on the same side. X and y are both on the left-hand side. This is unique to standard form. Standard form is the only one where the variables are both on the same side. So this is our, let's write down, standard form. And remember, standard form doesn't tell you anything obviously, right? You got to go hunting for it. So to get our slope, we have to do some work. And we found that formula just up above there. Slope is going to be the opposite a divided by b. So we can even write this above, ax plus by equals c. So we can see our a value is 2. The opposite of a positive 2 is a negative 2. And our b value is 3. And you do want to check to see if you can reduce it, and we cannot. Okay, we're going to keep going. Next one, y equals 4x minus 7. So x and y are on opposite sides of the equation, but we don't have any parentheses, which makes me think this isn't point slope form. This is slope-intercept. Slope-intercept form. And in slope-intercept form, our slope is always the coefficient of x. So here our slope is just 4. All right, I'm going to kind of backtrack here so I don't have to move around my page so much. Number 6. So one thing we're seeing, we're seeing parentheses. Okay, x and y are on opposite sides. Both of them have a value adding or subtracting to them. So this is our very nice point slope. And in point slope, our slope is always that coefficient. Well, I guess you could call it a coefficient, but not really. The number that we would be distributing into the parentheses. So that would be 2/3. Okay, it's okay that it's a fraction. Slope is often a fraction. Okay, here, 5. We have x and y on opposite sides, but no parentheses. So this is more a slope-intercept form. And in slope-intercept, our slope is always the coefficient of x. So our slope is going to be 1/2. All right, last one. So this is 3x minus 4y equals 10. X and y are on the same side of the equation. That only happens in standard form. So remember, standard form, we have to work for our slope. We have to do a little bit of something to get it. And that's take the opposite of a divided by b. So we're looking at 2 values here, a 3 and a -4. So a is 3. The opposite of 3 is -3. B is -4, so we'll put a -4 down there. Remember, you're only taking the opposite of the A, not of the B. And then we'll simplify, that's a positive 3/4. So there you have all 3 forms of an equation and how to find your slope from all 3 of those forms.